There's only 24 hours in a day. I got a pair of earbuds and I wish there was a way that I could know just what I want to listen to. There's 150,000 shows that I'm not sitting through. When the world is dark and boring, let us do your exploring. Pod on pod. Pod on pod.
Welcome to Pod on Pod, a guide to the world of podcasts because it's not your daddy's radio. We're your hosts.
I'm Josh.
I'm Joel, and this week on Pod, we're talking about How Did This Get Made? It's an Earwolf show.
Yeah.
Our second Earwolf show.
I tend to like Earwolf, man.
I have, I think, a slight predisposition against Earwolf, and I don't know why. Everyone that I listen to, I'm like, oh, I like this, but in my head, I don't like the Earwolf Network, and I think it goes back to the fact that I found Max Fun first. As I began to spread out into the podcasting world, I come from the Maximum Fun world, and I know all of those shows. Like, even before My Brother and Me, way back in the day, I listened to a show called Jordan Jesse Go, and I listened to Bullseye for a while. It wasn't called Bullseye at the time. It was called Young America or something like that. I don't know. It was something very pretentious.
The funny thing is I don't really care for Maximum Fun shows as a whole.
Really? It's just Mabim Bam mostly for
Yeah.
you? It's even dorkier than the dance fights in West Side Story, I would think. Like a podcaster network fight would be even worse than that, I imagine.
It'd be horrible.
But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about an actual cool podcast from the Earwolf Network, which we have reviewed at least the Scarborough Country we reviewed and County. We talked about both the shows, actually, although we didn't know it at the time. But that show is also from the Earwolf Network. We're going to have links in our show notes where you can find this show, or you can just check them out by going to earwolf.com and searching for How Did This Get Made? The stars of this show, Paul Scheer, Jason Mantzoukas.
Yep.
And June Diane Raphael. I knew Paul Scheer. He's been in a million things.
Yeah, I've always liked Paul Scheer.
Jason looks familiar to me, but that name doesn't ring a bell, and I'm not positive about his voice. June Diane Raphael, I have no idea where I know her from, if I do know her at all. Do you?
Nope.
All right. Well, we'll get to host likability in a minute, because what we do here on Pod every week is we think of a new podcast. We talk about that podcast after listening to at least 3 episodes each, and we break it down by discussing the content itself, the host likability, the production values, the audio quality, and then we give you some of our favorite moments before we rate the show with earbuds in. We don't talk about stars. We don't talk about thumbs up. We talk about earbuds here on Pod. We'll get to that later. Right now, let's get right into the content. What is this show about?
Let me preface this by saying I didn't really want to listen to this podcast, and we kept pushing it back, because I thought it was going to be a real negative podcast. Right? Like, How Did This Get Made? To me is like, oh, this is crap. How did this get made? Turns out that's not really the case. So they take movies that didn't do well at the box office. I listened to the Tango and Cash episode. I listened to the Ernest Goes to Jail episode.
I listened to that one too.
That was a really good episode.
It was a great one.
And I listened to Monkey Shine.
I listened to Ernest Goes to Jail. I listened to Howard the Duck. I listened to the Daredevil episode.
I bet Howard the Duck is fantastic.
Howard the Duck was a good one.
Yeah.
The Daredevil episode was good too. I also listened to the Junior episode, which is what their cover image is them in the poster for the movie Junior, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was a really good review as well.
So I think it's safe to say that none of these movies that we listen to on How Did This Get Made are blockbusters.
No, some of them did well at the box office, but then they were critically panned, and this sort of in retrospect, they're considered a terrible, terrible movie. Most of these episodes, by the way, feature not only the 3 main hosts, but they also feature a guest.
Which I don't really like shows with a guest.
Well, when you have 3 main hosts and you add in a guest,
it gets muddy.
Yes, we've talked about this before. Yeah. As much as we both love No Such Thing as a Fish, that's like the one detracting is there's just too many people in the room, too many people on the call. It's too much going on from time to time.
They do a good job of editing it.
No, they do a great job. And the guys, the people, the men and ladies behind How Did This Get Made, do a pretty good job too. But that is my one sort of knock against it. But the content itself is they talk about these maligned movies.
They take you through the whole movie. So here's what has to happen. I think you have to watch the movies too. It's really hard.
If you're going to sample this show, now maybe if this is your favorite show, if you listen to it and you love it, I think it would be entirely possible to listen to the show without having seen the film on some of them. But if you're going to try this, if you listen to our review and you like it and you want to try it out, definitely go and pick an episode that you have watched the movie of. That is going to make it much easier for you to follow, and then you'll know whether this is something that you want to go week to week. The other thing is, if you think any of these movies are movies that you don't want to have spoiled for you, obviously don't listen to the episode before you see the movie.
It's hard to gauge whether their opinions have any validity if you don't have one yourself.
See, I don't have a problem with that. I find the Weekly Planet podcast, for instance, okay? They often review whatever the big movie is that comes out. They talk about it, even if it's not the main topic of the week. If there's a big geek movie that comes out, they discuss it. Chappie, for instance, was just discussed on the most recent episode. And they went
into plot details. They pretty much just because on this show, How Did This Get Made? They pretty much start from the beginning of the movie and they move through the movie, explaining every little thing, asking questions, making jabs.
It's not time-wise a full commentary track, but it is often it would feel like a full commentary track. You're right.
Yeah, chronologically they follow the movie.
But what I found is, and not just for this show, because I didn't listen to any episodes that featured movies that I hadn't watched, but on other podcasts about movies, I have found that if it's a movie that I don't plan on watching anytime soon, I often enjoy hearing the discussion about it, even if it spoils certain things about it, because now I can listen to other people talk about the movie. I can be in a conversation about the movie in public without missing out on something. And then later, if I get to it, that's okay.
We're going to disagree.
Okay.
On that, just because what if they give you some misinformation and then which this show doesn't do. This show is fantastic with information, by the way.
Yeah.
But what if you get a misinformation from somebody else and then you go say it in public and then you look like an idiot?
Fair enough. I suppose so. Like somebody could tell you the wrong end to the crying game or something.
or they give you that fun fact, like this movie was made because the director was actually spent time in prison for shoplifting when he was 17. And then you go, hey, and people are like, you're an idiot. That didn't happen.
So let's talk about the hosts of this show. Let's move over to host likability. June Diane Raphael. You've got Paul Scheer and Jason Mantzoukas. I'm such a terrible pronunciator.
There we go.
Who was your favorite?
I really like Paul. Well, I like them all, man. I think of the 3 episodes that I listened to, I think each one had like some shining role in each episode. Like when Ernest goes to jail and they talk about like the bad Ernest, the jail Ernest. Whenever the ladies on that show were like, oh yeah, we found him sexy. I was like, what? How can anybody ever find Ernest P. Worrell sexy?
Dude, that's one of my favorite moments. You stole it, and it wasn't just June.
It was one of my favorite moments too. Yeah,
it was the other girl that was on that episode as well. They both were like, "No, evil Ernest was sexy."
Yeah,
they used the phrase
"animal magnetism,"
oozed sexuality.
Yes,
but on the flip side, though, it's been a whole long time since I've seen Ernest Goes to Jail. Don't get me wrong, but I sort of get where they're coming from too. The fact of the matter is, I think Jim Varney was a wonderful actor, a very underappreciated actor. And again, goes back to your point about this not being a show about negativity. It would be easy to throw stones at a show or the franchise of Ernest.
Well, they pretty much crushed Tango and Cash. It's one of my favorites.
Okay. All right.
It's one of the movies that I really enjoy.
Well, I mean, like they point out the terrible flaws in all of these movies. Yeah. But at the same time,
you can appreciate a movie for those flaws.
Yes, they started this podcast because they like watching films, even films that other people go, that's crap, that's a terrible movie. They go, yeah, but there's this thing and this thing that's wonderful about it. And you hear more of that, I think, in the podcast than anything else. My favorite of the 3, I got to tell you, was actually June. I think that the way that the 3 of them fit together, I know we complained about the idea of bringing on the 4th host. I don't think they need them. It was just the 3 of them for the Junior episode, and it was wonderful.
It was just the 3 of them for Monkey Shine too, and it was I like it much better when it's just the three hosts.
I understand the desire and the excitement about bringing a host onto a podcast, especially as like a smaller podcast. My other show right now is all about bringing on guests. Part of the idea of that is you get the cross promotion of those other people. You bring their audience to the table too. I get that. That's great. And I'm sure it's been good for their podcast as well. These three people, though, all have their own audiences. I feel like they could just serve to them, continue doing the show, and hone the product that they have between the three of them, and it might be an even better podcast. I would like it better, at least.
I think it would be a better podcast, but I also think you can't begrudge them because they're really just hanging out with their friends.
Absolutely. And again, they do a good job of that. Let's talk about how they do that very well. Audio quality for a minute. I'd say that it's more than passable. As we've already said, 3 people in a room is hard. Bringing the fourth guest, it makes it very cloudy. But it's fine. It's very listenable.
It can get very muddy.
Live.
And then when they play the clips, the volume between them talking and the clips can be jarring. And then whenever they just oh man, this is my biggest problem with the show. When in mid freaking sentence, they cut to a commercial. Mid sentence.
All of those, and
So jarring.
we're gonna bleed these together, I guess, because we're into production values now. That's not really audio quality to me. That goes into production values because the way that they put the show together, that's my biggest knock against the show. I'll agree with you. Abrupt editing for commercials.
Oh, man.
Look, it's not like you don't know this show has sponsorship. Like, when you're doing the show, you got to know halfway through, like, leave myself a hole here. It doesn't have to be big, but, like, just build in your ad slot to your program. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Everybody else does it. There's lots of people that do it better than this. And you're right, too, about the clips they play.
Man.
I like that you get the movie clips. We talked about the Faculty of Horror and the fact that they sprinkle the clips in there as necessary. They don't do a ton of it. They don't overdo it. When there's a good bit, especially when it punctuates something that they're discussing, they bring them in. But the volume is not there. The way that they're put together is just not. It's not.
It could be a cleaner show. It could be a much cleaner show.
For 3 people that are coming from a professional podcast network, all 3 of them are professional comedians in some variety and performers in their own right. I would just expect more. Like, the bar has been raised. There are guys in their garage that are doing it better than this. You can too, I think. Like, just spend a little bit more money on your producer every week. Like, they're not putting this podcast together, I don't think, week to week. Let's be honest. Anyway, so that's my knock there. We've talked pretty much about the whole show. Let's go over into our favorite moments. You and I both already mentioned the Ernest Goes to Jail episode. The ladies, it's Leslie Arfin, by the way. Leslie Arfin and June Diane Raphael. They both say that the bad Ernest oozed sexuality.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. My other big favorite moment came from I forgot. I listened to the No Holds Barred episode too. That one was probably my favorite episode, actually.
Really?
Yeah, they talked about the Hulk Hogan movie.
Yeah.
It is amazing. I haven't seen that movie in 20 years probably, but like, I very badly want to go back and watch it again.
I've never seen it and probably never will.
In that episode, they're talking about the characters taking a jet. Someone from the audience, this is a live episode, someone from the audience yells out, "It's a prop plane, not a jet."